So welcome everyone to the Radiant Torah of Rebbe Nachman. And we will be exploring this week's Parshat Bo. And we want to thank Dr. Eleanor Gudis for sponsoring these weekly classes. And really just the feedback has been very positive. And for those of you who've texted or called me, I wanted to extend your thanks because it's good to tell Dr. Gudis that people are enjoying the shir. And may it be a source of schus, of merit for her and for her family, and a source of bracha for good health, for long life, for everything good in this world, everything good in the spiritual world. And please, Hashem, may she and her family merit great success and closeness to Hashem and the true tzaddikim. Okay. So today we have Parshat Bo, which is such a loaded parsha. It was very difficult to decide which tidbits to share with you, but I'm going to pick some of my favorites. So the parsha begins with Hashem saying, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe bo el Paro. Okay, Hashem says to Moshe, come to Pharaoh. Okay, now if we remember previously in the last week's parsha, we had the first 7 plagues. And I went into depth about the plagues, but what I didn't go into depth about was Pharaoh's response to the plagues. Pharaoh's response to the plagues was, at first he wasn't happy about it, but he refused to let the Jews go. And this continues on into this parsha. But as we get to the turning point of the last 3 makos, of the last 3 plagues, Pharaoh begins to have a change of heart. So we're going to begin with the 8th plague, which is the first of the last 3, and that is Arbe, the plague of locusts. And locusts are, if you've ever seen them, they're like giant grasshoppery bugs, and they consume everything in their path. They are voracious eating machines. That's what locusts do. And what happened is that last time we had Barad, we had the hail, which destroyed the produce and the trees, but it didn't destroy them completely. We have a few different commentators who explain that some of the trees were destroyed, but not all. And we have other commentators who explain that the trees actually were shaken up by the hail and dropped their fruit. And then the locusts consumed the fruit that was on the ground. And so there are various ways of understanding why there was still something left for the locusts to eat. Now, it's quite interesting because this plague was Mida Keneged Mida, the idea of the Jews sowing crops for, excuse me, I dropped my notes. 1 minute, please. The Jews sowing crops for the Egyptians. And the Egyptians would make the Jews do everything. We picture the Jews as building the storage houses, okay? Some say pyramids. That's what we picture. But the Jews did all kinds of work. And one of the jobs they had was to be in like slave labor for the Egyptians for their fields, for their produce. And now if we understand what it was like back then, Egypt was very fertile. It was an extremely agriculturally successful land. Everything was watered by the Nile, which would flood its banks and irrigate the land. It wasn't the desert land as it appears today. And we know that there are other commentaries on this idea that the way countries look today isn't how they always were. Okay, so Egypt certainly was much lusher in most areas than it is today. And the Jews were responsible in large part for that at that time. And we know that when the Jews leave a country, there is a downturn in that country's economy, very much often in their gross national product, a downturn in what they can produce, a downturn in their trade. We know the destruction of Spain, for example, after the Inquisition. Spain went from a world power to within a relatively short time, okay, a couple of hundred years, maybe a little less, it went to a small, not very important country. Okay, it was an empire and so on. Same with Egypt. So anyway, the locusts ate everything, and the Kli Yakar tells us that we would think that because Pharaoh lived in a very sheltered, beautiful palace, and he was up in his own area, that everybody else would have been affected first. But no, the Kli Yakar says that Pharaoh's palace was the first, his grounds were the first to be attacked by these bugs. And the locusts entered into everything. They were insatiable. They ate the Egyptians' clothing and even their precious articles. And in kind of a hint to the plague of darkness that was coming, they were so thick that they blacked out the sun. Now, at this point, Pharaoh had really felt that he had had enough, and he relented a little bit. But then what happened was Moshe came and said, if you don't relent completely, if you don't let us go, you will have a plague of darkness. And the plague of darkness, Choshech, started. And I would like to really go into this plague because it has very profound meanings for us. So the plague of darkness is actually divided up into sections. So on the first 3 days, the Egyptians were able to move around reasonably freely in the dark, okay? But they couldn't see. Even if they lit candles and torches, it was just a very thick darkness. And the reason is because there were Jews who weren't going to be taken out of Egypt. Why? So many of you, I'm sure, have heard that not all the Jews were taken out. Some say that 4/5 of them were not taken out. I don't know the exact percentage, but the idea is those Jews who didn't want to leave, didn't leave. Now, Rebbe Nachman tells us, Ratzon is everything. Will is everything. Will and desire is everything, meaning whatever you want to accomplish, there has to be an element of will and desire, want. And the famous quote from Rebbe Nachman is, if you want, you'll do. If you want, you'll do. And these Jews did not want to be taken out of Egypt. We're talking, we can't, how can we understand this? They were slaves, they were crying out to Hashem. So we do know that actually, even though they were slaves, the Jews had a lot of personal wealth. And there were Jews who felt very culturally Egyptian. And they didn't want to go out into an unknown with Moshe and give up the relative comfort and the security. I mean, it was definitely a type of security. They did have wealth. Jews had a lot of livestock, okay? And they had enough food. And some of them even mingled with their neighbors. They didn't want to leave. So the Jews who didn't have that ratzon, that desire to leave, Hashem put them, unfortunately, out of the picture. And that occurred during the plague of darkness. And it says, some commentators say it's on the first 3 days of this plague. And but because Hashem loved the Jews, even the Jews who rejected him, rejected Moshe HaTzadik, that's Moshe was the tzaddik, rejected the idea of leaving what we call in English the flesh pots of Egypt, he didn't want the Egyptians to know that these Jews were being punished through death. So this occurred during the plague of darkness when the Egyptians couldn't see. I find this so poignant and so moving and affecting, because Hashem loves us no matter what. Even if we struggle with the basic desire to leave galut, to leave exile, even if we're not even sure we have that desire, Hashem loves us and he wants to protect us. And he even wants to protect our honor in a way. Why? Because our honor, our personal honor, is so bound up with Hashem's honor and Hashem's glory and the expression of his honor and glory in the world. Okay, so anyway, we're going to continue. So we had this terrible plague, and the plague really, it really was brutal. The Choshech consumed the Egyptians. They were stuck. They were frozen. They couldn't function, but they did have a vision. Each Egyptian had a vision of the Jews who lived in Goshen. They could see that they had light and they were going around their ordinary business. But even if an Egyptian moved in with a Jew, he was surrounded by darkness. And this is a darkness of the soul, okay? And, you know, Rebbe Nachman explains that the plague of darkness is, he doesn't actually directly explain plague of darkness, but he explains the concept of a plague of darkness. What does this mean? So he gives us concepts that are related. So he says there is a body and there is a soul. There is matter, and then there is form or shape, or something that matter is poured into. There is darkness, there is light. There is death, and there is life. And he shows how these concepts are related. The body, the material, and matter, the material, and darkness and death are all one concept. But the neshama, the soul, and form, the shape that gives form to creation, and light and life are all one concept. And the Rebbe emphasizes it's simply a matter of choice. Even if we feel up against the wall, driven by what seem like practical matters and desires, we can always take a moment, we can always take a deep breath. We can always pause and align ourselves internally with the ideas of light and life, with the ideas of soul and connection to Hashem. And you know, I know it's a very painful and confusing and conflicting topic to think that there were Jews who didn't make it out of Egypt. But when we compare it to today's exile, virtually all, if almost all the tzaddikim say today, every Jew, every neshama is going to be taken out of Galus when Mashiach comes. Some sooner, some later, but every one of us is going to be taken out. Why? Because today's exile is in some ways darker than the Egyptian exile, okay? Yes, true. We're not laboring as slaves for very brutal taskmasters, but we are stuck in a kind of slavery where the material world feels so real to us. It in its own way enslaves us. What we're going through in life, what we see, it shakes us up, and the natural inclination of a human being, of any human being, is to cling more to what we know, to cling more to what comforts us. Who wouldn't want that? We all want to be comforted. I know I do. But Hashem is showing us, as he showed the Jews during the refusal of Pharaoh to let the Jews go, Hashem is showing us even today, we can't trust in any pharaohs. We can't trust in rulers and leaders and governments. We can't. We can only trust in Hashem. Okay. And that is the message that we can take in large measure from this Parsha. Trust in Hashem and his true tzaddikim, because the true tzaddikim take us out. Their teachings illuminate the way for us. So we're not stuck in the plague of darkness alongside those who want to be Egyptians. Okay. So anyway, the plague of darkness continues, and there are some negotiations about coming out of Egypt with Pharaoh. And what happens is that Pharaoh says no. He says, go away, don't come near me again, I'm not letting you out. And Moshe says, okay, I will never again return to your palace, never again. I will never again see you, Pharaoh. And that was Moshe's final statement, direct face-to-face with the main oppressor of the Bnei Israel, the children of Israel. Okay. And Moshe warns that there's going to be a terrible plague after the plague of darkness. And this plague is going to be the makas bechoros, the killing of the firstborn, the death of the firstborn. Okay. And the idea behind this warning is something that we've mentioned before. Hashem wants even a rasha, even a wicked person like Pharaoh, to do tshuva. He wants even Pharaoh to have the opportunity to say, you know what? I'm going to change my ways. I regret what I've done. Let me fix some mistakes. Let me try to make reparations if I'm able. Let me come back to you, God. Let me try to live life in alignment with you, with my Creator. So again and again, we see throughout Va'era and Bo, these two parshas from last week and this week, this idea that Hashem wants even the most wicked person to return to him. Certainly, holy people who love Hashem like ourselves, he definitely wants us to return to him as well, to the best of our ability, to align ourselves with him. And this really comes from love. And what I want to point out here is that, and we'll cover this in a later parsha as well. We'll address this in a later parsha. But Hashem loves all his creatures. They are his babies. We are his chosen. We are his chosen ones. We are his son. We're called the son of God in the Tanakh. We are. But he loves all his creatures. He loves all his humans especially. And he wants everyone to have the opportunity to make these choices. Okay, so how does this translate to us in our everyday lives, these choices? Okay, so we aren't under the same pressures as back then in terms of impending plagues. Okay, but when we see more and more chaos going on in the world, it's a clue to us that Hashem wants us to turn to him. I was speaking to somebody the other day. She's going through a very difficult time. And she basically anticipated, she knows, she said, what does it mean? And then she anticipated what I would say it means to come closer to Hashem. Hashem's trying to get our attention. He wants us to come closer to him because he loves us. Certainly, if there's love for Pharaoh, there's love for us. Okay, so Moshe delivers this warning, and he says, around midnight, I am going to go out in the midst of Mitzrayim, in the midst of Egypt, and every firstborn in the land of Egypt will die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on his throne, to the firstborn of a slave woman. Okay. So what we have to understand about this is that the plague of the firstborn had much greater ramifications for the Egyptians than at first thought. Because what would happen is that each firstborn child would unfortunately pass away. And we know this is Mida Keneged Mida for the cruel treatment of Pharaoh of the Jewish children. Very cruel treatment, not only throwing the babies into the water, but there's a midrash that says something so awful. I hate to even say it, but I'm going to say it, that he would make the Jews put babies in between the bricks and the mortar in his building, newborn babies. Horrible stuff. Okay, there's other stories too, equally as disturbing. And so this is Mida Keneged Mida. Now, what we have to know about the Egyptians is they were an extremely licentious and immoral people. So because everybody was making babies with everyone else, not just the husbands and wives, there were many firstborn, depending on who impregnated who. So a woman could technically have several firstborn from different husbands, and a man could, different men, I shouldn't say husbands, and a man could technically have many firstborn from different wives. And so this really decimated the Egyptian population. And it would decimate them, but still there was a warning. There was a warning from Moshe to Pharaoh. And then we take a break. Before the plague of the firstborn even begins, before there is even a chance for it to begin, the Parsha switches over and it starts to tell us about the mitzvahs, the mitzvot that Hashem gave the Jewish people. And I really would like to go with the Torah's digression and discuss it. So the first mitzvah that Hashem gives the Bnei Yisrael, all the Jewish people, is the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh, the mitzvah of the new moon or the renewing moon, which is, of course, the new month. Okay, same thing. It's the same thing. And also establishing the calendar. Now, this is really a fascinating topic, and I want to go with it a little bit just because we have to understand how important Rosh Chodesh and the lunar calendar, which is regulated in a to the solar calendar, it's matched up so that it doesn't get out of sync, how this affects us. So we can understand that when the Romans came to destroy the Jews later on, okay, one of the first things they did was they banned Rosh Chodesh. They banned other mitzvahs too, but Rosh Chodesh. Why? Because with Rosh Chodesh, we are able to determine all the holidays of the year. Rosh Chodesh gives us the opportunity to understand when the next Yom Tov is coming, and the three Yom Tovim, Pesach, okay, Shavuot, and Sukkot. These three Yom Tovim are also dependent on the determination of the new moon, the new month. Now, the Jewish calendar is different than the other calendars of the world. the Christian calendar is a solar calendar. And the Christian calendar has a leap year every 4 years. I think it's every 4 years, in which 1 month is given an extra day. But that generally resolves it to maintain the seasonality of the months. What does this mean? It means that December will be in winter and July will be in summer. The Islamic calendar, the other important calendar, which many people, I don't know how many Muslims are in the world, but maybe a billion, a lot, use. That calendar is completely a lunar calendar. It only goes by the new moon, by the moon cycle. And that calendar has no seasonality. So they have a special a period of a fast month called Ramadan. It's an important holiday to them. And they fast all day and they eat at night. That Ramadan, it can be in December, in the winter, it could be in spring, it could be in fall, it could be any time of year, because they only reckon their calendar by the lunar calendar. Now, the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar that is corrected, that's corrected by the solar calendar. It unites with the solar calendar. And so the Jewish calendar, which definitely comes by the moons, has a certain way of rectifying itself so that everything is seasonal. And I hope you find this interesting. To me, this is really fascinating. I am going to keep it brief, but if you are interested in learning more, you can Google it. There's a lot of information online, and there are a lot of sperm on it, a lot of books on it. And I happen to have some, which I find fascinating reading. So this idea with the going with the lunar calendar, it would leave us with Pesach in the middle of winter if we didn't adjust it to meet the seasonal calendar, the solar year. So what we do is we have 3 types of regular years. And in those 3 types of regular years, I think there's deficient, and then there's normal, and then there's full. In those types of those years, an extra day might be added to Cheshvan and maybe another month. But then for a 19-year cycle, I got it wrong last time I mentioned it, a 17-year cycle, a 19-year cycle, there are 7 times, I hope I'm not mixing up my numbers, in which we have an extra Adar, okay? We have a second Adar. And this extends the year by another month. And we have, the sages decided on Adar. Why? Why Adar? Okay, so I don't know the mathematical reasons. There are mathematical reasons, but the simple reason is Adar is the happiest month. It's the month that Purim occurs. So rather than have a month in which we have, let's say, 2 Tisha B'Avs, we have a month where we have a full Purim, and then we have a month where we have a sort of subtle second Purim. Okay, but mainly the idea is Adar brings in joy. So we get the opportunity for an extra Adar. I think this year is a leap year. Okay, so we'll have that extra Adar. And it extends, it makes everything later, but oh, how wonderful. 2 times as much joy. So anyway, this was established in this Parsha. Now, I have somebody saying, yes, okay, I do want to answer those questions in the chat. If you can't see them, you can open your chat. Naomi says, was Rosh Chodesh not the first mitzvah given to Bnei Yisrael? Yes, it is the first mitzvah. And then, yes, and Shalomit Michal, could you send some of those books and titles? Yes, I will send some. Okay, what I will do is I might post it in the WhatsApp chats. Okay, and that way everybody can see. There's one particular book that's, I don't know why I love reading it. It's just basically the calendars all the way up until Mashiach comes, basically, because now we have a set calendar. In biblical times, the calendar, the Rosh Chodesh, had to be announced by 2 witnesses, but at a certain point that was no longer feasible. So we have a set planned calendar. So we know what will come next year, the year after, and the year after. So every now and then I look at it and say, oh, when will Pesach be this year? Not when will Uman Rosh Hashanah be this next year? And what will be going on then? I don't know. I find it very exciting. So yes, I will send some book titles. Okay. So anyway, you would like to learn more about the calendar with me. It's a difficult subject. Maybe my husband would teach it, because it's a lot of numbers and math and calculating, not my strong suit, in case you haven't noticed. Okay, so we're going to continue with the mitzvot that broke up this idea of the next plague. It sort of was wedged in there in this parsha, and we're going to understand why in a minute. So the first mitzvah to the Bnei Yisrael, to the Jewish people, was Rosh Chodesh. Very important mitzvah. I want to say one more thing about Rosh Chodesh. We have a custom as women, sometimes men do this too. There's certain types of malachas, creative work, that we don't do during Rosh Chodesh. And there's certain types of non-creative work we don't do. So one of the things is many of us have the custom not to do laundry. It's not like my favorite custom. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Most women if women sew, we don't sew on Rosh Chodesh. We also have an important custom to have a Suda on a festive meal on Rosh Chodesh. And if you can't have a big festive meal, at least, and you can't put on a white tablecloth, at least if it's a 2-day Rosh Chodesh, at least the first day or the second day, whatever you can do, a 1-day Rosh Chodesh just once, have a meal during Rosh Chodesh in which you wash for bread. A lot of women don't wash during the week. They don't want the calories and the carbs. They'll have challah on Shabbos. Have a piece of challah on Rosh Chodesh if you can do it. It's a beautiful custom, and we're honoring a very, very important holiday. I guess I'll continue a little more about Rosh Chodesh. It's associated with us as women because we are compared to the moon, okay? We are the quiet reflection. I don't know, some of us are not so quiet, but the quiet reflection of the sun. We are more hidden, we're more mysterious. We wax and wane in our moods, and so on and so forth. Okay, I'll continue. So meanwhile, this Rosh Chodesh was given in Nisan. This mitzvah was given in Nisan. And the commandment was that this would be the beginning of the months, so that Nisan would be another new year. Now, we had Rosh Hashanah as a new year, and then we're going to have Tu B'Shvat coming up in less than 2 weeks now, the 15th of Shvat of this month. It's a beautiful holiday. Well, maybe we'll do a special class on that. And we have a special program. I'll tell you about it later. And we have the other new year of Nisan. So we have actually a few new years. Okay, Nisan is the first of the months. And very often when people count months, they'll start from Nisan because this is referred to in this parsha. And Pesach is the 15th day of the first month. Okay, so we are given the mitzvah of Pesach, the Pesach offering, and the Yom Tov right after we're given the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. So Pesach, it's so interesting. Many, many Jews who don't celebrate any holidays, maybe Hanukkah, will have a Pesach Seder. We all have such a connection to the Seder because Pesach is really the first Yom Tov that was given to us. And in this parsha, we are describing the Exodus, which will follow. We're going to get to it. I'm going to do my best to jam it in here. So what happens is it's given contemporaneously with the parsha. Now, in the Parsha, we're given the idea of the Pesach offering, and we're also given the idea of the Yom Tov. And I would like to touch on this now. So, and I would like to tell you what Rebbe Nachman says. So Hashem, so first of all, the Pesach offering, the Pesach sacrifice, which was a lamb, which was the Egyptians' deity, okay? The Jews were commanded to slaughter a lamb and eat from it in haste. Everybody remembers that from the Passover Seder, right? So Hashem commanded the Jews, says actually it's Rebbe Nachman, to bring a sheep, a lamb, as the Pesach offering in order to break the idolatry of Egypt. And the idolatry of Egypt was bound up in avarice, bound up in an absolute lust for gold, for wealth. Okay, now we know it was bound up in immorality, but Rebbe Nachman points out that the Egyptians, okay, stole a lot from the Jews. Okay, and that is one of the reasons why when the Jews leave Egypt, they take with them the wealth from the Egyptians. And it's actually during the plague, they say, of darkness, and some say it was later, that the Jews, under orders from Moshe Rabbeinu, from Hashem, went to the Egyptians, to their neighbors, knocked on the door and said, could I borrow some gold and silver with you? Hint, hint, you're probably not going to get it back, but can I borrow it? Because they were being paid for their labor, okay? And they were also collecting what was rightfully theirs. And so the Jews left Egypt with great wealth. And that is the way the avarice, the idolatry were broken, by returning what is rightfully one's own. And Rebbe Nachman explains to us something amazing about the Yom Tov. Each Yom Tov, okay, rectifies a particular quality in us that we all need to overcome at one level or another. Some more than others, and some have one taiva, one desire that's greater than others. This is normal, okay? And Pesach is the rectification for avarice, for greed. And it's so interesting because on Pesach, we have the custom to put out our finest, even if you don't use China, even if you use plastic all year long, on Pesach, we have a custom. I'm sorry, somehow, okay. On Pesach, we have a custom to put out the finest china that you possibly have, okay? People who use, you know, we have our Pesach plates for the Seder, you're using it once a year, yet it should be really as nice as you can afford. And we recline like kings. Some people have the custom that women also recline. Everybody is accustomed that men recline on pillows. A lot of Sephardim women recline also to actually have and experience Pesach in total freedom and luxury. Should be luxurious, okay? Now, if you have 500 people and you have to use some paper and plastic, okay, good for you. You're reaching a lot of people and you're helping a lot of people celebrate Pesach and enjoy the Seder. But if not, it's absolutely a very precious and treasured custom to experience Pesach in a bit of luxury, which is when you think about it, very unusual. We're not usually told to experience things in luxury. So this rectifies wealth because wealth is being used, and the avarice for wealth, is being used for a holy, holy purpose, to celebrate our freedom, to celebrate our development, our spiritual development as a people, and our personal spiritual development in relationship to Hashem. Okay, now, okay, hold on one second. I keep hearing a pinging. Yes. Okay, so that's what I figured. Somebody's having problems signing in and out. Okay, there's nothing we can do about it now. Okay, so anyway.
Rebbitzin, could I ask a question, please? I'm
Sure.
sorry to jump in. Hi, my name is Cindy Rand. So
Hi,
I love everything that you're saying. It's excellent. I want to understand how women feel a sense of freedom and everything that you're saying when it's basically like the women that are cleaning and preparing and serving and cleaning up afterwards. How can you please explain that in a different way that will help me to understand Pesach? And thank you.
Absolutely. I will say it very in brief here because I want to address the Parsha, but what I can tell you is I have some videos about Pesach and some articles about Pesach. And if you WhatsApp me or text me or email me, I can respond to you in greater depth. And every year I usually do a Pesach event.
Thank you. Could you please share your WhatsApp or email, please?
Yes,
thank you.
I will share it, and I will share it at the end of the class. And the idea is that first of all, men should clean for Pesach too. Shouldn't just be women. Men also, if they have time, they should clean for Pesach too. It should be a joint preparation. That's not just my opinion. A man has to do things for Shabbos as well. It's incumbent upon them. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, okay, part of his avoda, part of his service of Hashem was sweeping the floors. Okay, so we all have to pitch in. And then how each family divides it has to be in a way that's supportable to each person. That's number one. And then number two, very briefly, if it feels like slavery and it's still not a feeling of freedom for you, and I hear it, and you wouldn't be the first woman and you won't be the last. Okay. If that's how it feels to you and the pressure is there, it's time to really revisit how you're relating to the process and to put in some very wonderful, uplifting techniques of Rebbe Nachman's, as well as addressing the practical aspects of it so you're not driven crazy. And I'm going to just say that in brief because I don't want to go, it will be too tangential to develop that, but I'm delighted to speak with you later and to share other classes and share them with you. Okay, I know that's not a satisfactory answer, but that's the best I could do in the limited time. Okay, so we'll continue. The next idea of Pesach is this idea of matzah, which is the main food of Pesach, and we don't eat leaven on Pesach. We don't eat chametz. Chametz is a ferment, okay? It's a piece of sourdough, something that's risen. In order for bread to rise, it has to have a ferment. It could be yeast, whatever it is. And a risen one of the 5 grains is something we don't eat on Pesach. And one of the benefits of having this period where we don't eat chametz is the chance to rid ourselves of the chametz of our thoughts, our desires, our outlet. So the classic description is anything that puffs us up, okay? So for example, anything that makes us prideful or arrogant and so on is chametz. Also, chametz is anything sour that we think about. So this is not just symbolism. This is a material representation that Hashem gives us for our inner spiritual experience. I really dislike the word ritual, and I don't even like the word symbol, okay? Because thank you, Charlene, Sarala put my phone number down there for you. Thank you. Okay, so the idea is that whatever we are experiencing materially has an inner, is an expression of our inner relationship to ourselves, to Hashem, and so on, to the Jewish people. And so therefore, when we think about chametz, if it's not real to us, if it's just something that is oh, there's a piece of bread and we can't eat it. And okay, it's a very nice symbol for this kind of bad thought or that kind of bad media, bad characteristic. Okay, that's very nice. Isn't that exciting? But if we can reflect enough on it to find these links, and if we can learn the teachings of the tzaddikim that explain these links at a deep level, it becomes part of our reality. And remember, this really is the second mitzvah. First, there's the Pesach offering, and then there's the Pesach Yom Tov. So this is second and third mitzvah given to the Jewish people. And I don't think it's an accident, Cindy, that I don't think it's an accident that a lot of women do feel that it's a kind of slavery. I'm not going to lie about it. A lot of women do. It feels like a burden to them. And it is hard. It's extremely difficult. One of the ways in which I like to think of it is, and this is very relevant to this parsha, which is why I'm mentioning it, is we get to do this in the comparative comfort of our own homes, rather than fleeing with our belts wrapped around us and fleeing into the desert in haste. And we are making Yom Tov, we have time to prepare, we don't have to rush. And just that in and of itself helps me sometimes manage the pressure, because it can be very high pressure. Okay, so anyway, we have Pesach. These mitzvahs are given to us. I mentioned it's a rectification for avarice. We're going to skip that, and we're going to get to the plague of the firstborn, because I really want to get to Yetziat Mitzrayim. I want to get to the Exodus. And okay, so we have the plague of the firstborn, and Rebbe Nachman tells us that the plague of the firstborn was representative of the destruction of atheism. Okay. So how do we think about this? So, it is a horrible plague. It's a very disturbing idea. Even if it's occurring to our enemy, it's a disturbing idea to hear that the firstborn are killed. I mean, most of them were adults at this point, but it's not a fun idea. And it's not about revenge. It's about uprooting idolatry, uprooting an idea that Hashem exists, but he doesn't really have much time for me. Okay, or Hashem exists, but I need an intermediary. There were Egyptians who believed in God, okay, but they also believed in their own gods, lahavdil, okay. They believed in intermediaries. Biggest astrologers, hugest astrologers were Egyptians. Huge magicians, so many idols. It's quite unbelievable. The only pantheon of idols that I can think of would be the Hindus. Okay. And if you want to get a taste of that, not that you should want to get a taste of the concept, but everybody knows some yoga poses. Each yoga pose was a form of worship of a different idol. Okay. And Hindus will tell you themselves. So it's not only the destruction of the firstborn, but it's the destruction of the concept of we can have a free-for-all. We can have all kinds of relations at the whim of our desires, not us, but the Egyptians. And all we have to do is make an offering of a sheep or worship a crocodile or bow down to the sun, and we'll be okay. All right. This is quite a unique concept. Rebbe Nachman's approach is very unique. He goes very deep in explaining why the plagues occurred and why they were what they were. Okay, it's really deep beyond the basic symbolism. Now, the plague came. It came at midnight, and it was horrible. And Pharaoh thought that it really wouldn't affect him, but because of all the illicit relationships his wives had, it affected him as well, very much so. Okay, so his children were affected, his children that he didn't know were his children were affected, and so on. Now, there is a medrash that Pharaoh was a firstborn. So how come he wasn't killed? So there's a couple of discussions about this. One is that he was needed. He's a very important ruler, and he's needed as a leader of Egypt in order for, number one, the Jews to go out, and number two, to show the world that he was punished too. I mean, really, it's not a word I use very freely, is punishment. Okay, but he's punished for his willful intransigence and refusal to allow the Jews to go out and to make them suffer. That's what he wanted. And then the other commentators say, well, maybe he really wasn't a firstborn because maybe his mother and or his father, whatever, had many, his mother would have to be his mother, had many illicit relations before him. Okay, all right. So anyway, we get this situation, and the Jews are about to be let free. Pharaoh really has a second thought. Now, some say that he did return to Moshe, and Moshe saw him again. Some say it was just his leaders. I don't know, but he went to Moshe and begged for him to get rid of these Jews. Get rid of them. I don't want these plagues anymore. And so the Egyptians pressured all their neighbors to leave as quickly as possible. And the Jews had all the valuables they took from the Egyptians. They had the dough that was baked before rising. So they had the matzah, okay? And they had their livestock as well. It says that each Jew had at least 90 head of livestock. I don't know, that's a medrash. Maybe it was more, maybe it was less. And they fled, and they fled on the 15th of Nisan, and they went out and they ran and they left the Egyptians. Now we know what happens next. Okay, we know that Pharaoh even then has regrets, because the lesson here is that a Rasha has no standing in time. If we want to reflect back to the fact that Rosh Chodesh and the calendar, in essence, were given to us, okay? Time-bound mitzvah of Pesach was given to us in this Parsha. It's the opposite of the Egyptians, the complete opposite, because a Rasha only remembers 1 minute to the next based on their impulses, while what's required of us as human beings, as Jews, is to remember Hashem in all our moments. And it is the opposite of a Rasha. We don't feel one thing one moment, one thing the next, and therefore we say, oh, okay, this year I'm not going to really get involved with Rosh Chodesh because this year I feel like doing this, or this month I feel like doing that, and so on and so forth. But that's how Pharaoh was. He changed his mind a lot. Now, it can be a good thing to change your mind, especially if you're being stubborn and your mind needs to be changed. But in general, we should think about our choices. We should believe in our convictions. We should have them, and we should act accordingly. Who does all the time? Nobody. I mean, nobody does, but we try, okay? And we also remember the good things that Hashem has done for us, and we remember the difficult times, and we want to keep those times in our mind in order that we not go down that path again. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it's important to have as many connections as possible. And this idea of remembering the Holocaust, I think, is important. Okay, I am bringing it up in this Parsha for a reason, because, okay, unlike what some people say, oh, if you talk about the Holocaust and it's something sad, you're going to turn Jews away from Judaism because they think it's all about being a victim. I don't know about that. I think it's important for us to understand that the Jewish people is forged, were made in difficult times. and that we shouldn't forget the difficult times, just as we shouldn't forget the positive times, okay? But we shouldn't forget the difficult times, because these are warning posts to us to not go down the same path, okay? Where that takes you in your thoughts is, obviously individual. It depends on where you're holding. But the idea is we should also never forget, Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus from Egypt. And each year on Pesach, when we have the Seder, we don't just tell over the story of the Haggadah and eat a delicious meal far too late at night, and then we can't get to sleep. No, we are reliving it. We are not just remembering, we are reliving it in our minds, hearts, and souls. We are not forgetting. Pharaoh forgot what it felt like. Even the plague of the firstborn. How could you forget that? He forgot it. Now, I have to tell you, I have quite an interesting personal story of someone who almost died twice. Okay, she had very serious disease, a very difficult situation. And somebody went to daven for her by the caver of a tzaddik. It wasn't Rebbe Nachman, it was someone else. And she had a literally miraculous recovery. And within weeks, months, she'd forgotten about it. And then a couple of years later, she was in a very serious accident. Okay, she's a dear friend of mine, and she knows that I use her as a positive example. And she was in a very serious accident, and the doctor said she's not going to make it. And she said at that point, she believed with all her heart that the accident came about because she had forgotten what it felt like before to be in such a precarious situation. And she wanted to live more than anything, not only for her children and her family, she wanted to live for herself and her relationship with Hashem. And she said in that moment, it brought her to a new place because she had forgotten. She had forgotten what it felt like. And she told me, she said, Chaya Rivka, you wouldn't believe it, but even in that moment where I was in the accident, I was going through it, time slowed down for me. Even in that moment, I remembered Hashem and I thanked him for reminding me of my connection with him. And Pharaoh is related to the mafria, the confused and disturbing and confused thoughts that leave us no time for remembering how much Hashem loves us and how much we really love Hashem and how much we want to live our lives together with him. Okay, Pharaoh is the opposite of that. And a Jew has to live in the opposite way. Everybody has to live in the opposite way. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming to this week's Torah class. We didn't get too far into Yetzias Mitzrayim, but we will next week, God willing. We'll learn more. It's a very exciting Parsha, and I hope you all have a good week. And also, I'm going to just turn off the recording here. Hold on one second. Pause these.